Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Karabo's birth occurred on a sweltering afternoon in the bustling city of Mboya, a modern African metropolis blending shimmering skyscrapers, never-ending traffic jams, and cultural heritage. The child's father, Chief Adissa Mafu, was one of the region's most prominent businessmen, a man who had risen from humble beginnings in the dusty outskirts to rub shoulders with senators and international investors. His popularity sprung not just from his financial success but from his philanthropic heart, funding scholarships and healthcare centers across the city. Yet despite his wealth and social status, Adissa had endured many heartbreaks in the marriage department. His first wife, Safia, passed away soon after giving birth to Karabo, leaving him devastated. As the old custom demanded in the rural area of Ubalo, where Adissa's ancestral compound stood, his mourning period lasted for a full year. But lonely nights and the weight of single parenthood soon nudged him to consider a second marriage. That was when Lola appeared in his life. She was introduced by a high-ranking politician at a gala. With her radiating smile, long braided hair, and a fierce intellect that rivaled city attorneys, Lola seemed the perfect stepmother for infant Karabo. She had a cosmopolitan elegance about her, adorned with the latest local fashion designs that combined Western cuts with vibrant African prints. Everyone in Adissa's circle commented on how well-spoken she was, how she balanced tradition and modern savvy with equal grace. From the outside, the union appeared perfect: a caring father, a new mother figure, and an infant who would grow up in privilege. But behind Lola's faultless exterior lay a cunning heart capable of harboring dangerous ambitions. She had no intention of sharing Adissa's fortune with a child that wasn't hers by blood. While Adissa doted on Karabo with unwavering devotion, Lola observed from the sidelines, quickly calculating how best to eliminate the competition. As Karabo grew, so did the public's adoration for this wide-eyed, curious child who always seemed calm, almost otherworldly, in temperament. Elders who visited from Ubalo would occasionally murmur in hushed tones that Karabo's eyes resembled those of Osumurai, the ancient river goddess rumored to protect the region's waterways. No one took the rumor seriously in this modern age of smartphone apps and advanced technology, no one except Lola. Superstition clung to her like a second skin, and the idea that Karabo might be protected by some unseen force made her uneasy. One fateful day, when the sun bore down mercilessly and the city shimmered in a heat wave, Lola decided the time was right to rid herself of the child. Adissa had been called out of the country for an urgent business trip in Dubai, leaving Lola as Karabo's sole caretaker. She feigned an air of motherly love, instructing the nanny to take some time off so Lola could enjoy bonding moments with her stepdaughter. The unsuspecting nanny left gratefully, never imagining the horror that would soon unfold. Late in the afternoon, Lola dressed baby Karabo in a simple onesie and wrapped her in a bright Kent cloth. With methodical precision, she snuck out of the gated mansion, taking a back road that led to the deserted outskirts of the city. She had studied her route meticulously. There were no security cameras or patrolling police on that rundown path. Her heart thudded in her chest, not out of guilt but out of a raw excitement. She believed that once she disposed of Karabo, her path to claiming Adissa's empire would be cleared. The river she chose was nicknamed Ikemba, an old waterway that used to be the lifeblood of Ubalo's ancestors. Over the decades, rapid urbanization had turned parts of Ikemba into a polluted drainage channel. Yet some parts still shimmered with a haunting beauty. Heavy with silt and lined with mangroves, this isolated portion of the river was often avoided after dusk due to swirling rumors of drownings and sightings of ghosts. The perfect place, Lola thought, to hide a crime that no one would ever link back to her. She approached the edge, the thick mud grabbing at her fine sandals, and looked around to confirm she was alone. There wasn't a soul in sight. With trembling hands, though not from remorse, she lifted Karabo from the cloth. The baby, only 3 months old, gazed up at her stepmother with wide, guileless eyes. For a split second, Lola hesitated when she saw Karabo's innocent face. But she thought of the wealth, the influence, and her desire to reign uncontested in Adissa's world. She hardened her heart, took a deep breath, and dropped the infant into the murky water. A soft cry escaped Karabo's tiny lips before the water enveloped her completely. Lola watched for only a moment to confirm that the baby had sunk, then stepped back, adrenaline rushing through her veins. She wiped beads of sweat from her brow, glanced over her shoulder, and quickly headed back to the main road. In her mind, the worst was over. Soon, she would fabricate a story of Karabo's disappearance, perhaps claiming she had been kidnapped or snatched from a parked car. When Adissa returned, heartbroken, he would be none the wiser. However, what Lola did not know was that Karabo was no ordinary child. She was, in truth, the daughter of the river goddess Hstorytine, a secret that had been shrouded by Safia's lineage for generations. While Safia herself was human, she bore the bloodline of water spirits that had once intermingled with mortal families. This meant that Karabo was under the direct protection of the forces that ruled the water. And Ikemba was, unbeknownst to Lola, an extension of Hstorytine's realm in the modern sprawl of Mboya. The river did not claim Karabo's life that night. Instead, the current seemed to cradle her gently. Far below the surface, an otherworldly glow appeared, illuminating the murkiness. In a swirl of pale green and silver lights, a form resembling a luminous figure appeared, bending gracefully to pick up the child. A soft lullaby, as ancient as the oldest legends in Ubalo, filled the water. Karabo's crying ceased, replaced by a peaceful cooing. Thus began the events that would ripple through the city of Mboya and far beyond, forging alliances and enmities, unearthing secrets, and challenging the boundaries between the mortal realm and the supernatural. Lola would soon discover that the darkness she unleashed that night was only the beginning of a story whose ending even the wise elders could not have predicted. Night fell over Mboya, painting the skyline with sparkling city lights. Neon billboards advertising mobile telecommunication services and local breweries flashed amidst the silhouettes of towering buildings. The air carried a blend of car exhaust, roasted street corner suya, spiced meat, and the distant hum of Afrobeat music. Unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding in the depths of the Ikemba River, the city continued its usual bustling nightlife. Inside Adissa's opulent mansion, Lola carefully staged the evidence of Karabo's supposed abduction. She left one of Karabo's baby blankets hanging precariously by the front gate as though it had been dropped in haste. She scattered a few of Karabo's toys near the driveway, calling the security guards with frantic pleas, insisting she had only stepped away for a moment and returned to find the child missing. Her performance was worthy of an award. She screamed, wept, and banged on the walls until the guards and neighbors gathered in shock and confusion. Police were soon summoned to the mansion. Officers, modern in their methods, wearing crisp uniforms and carrying tablets to record statements, began questioning Lola, the house staff, and any potential witnesses. They dusted for fingerprints, checked security camera footage in the area, and took note of Lola's distraught demeanor. The leads were scarce, however. No cameras had captured the suspicious back route Lola had taken, and no eyewitnesses came forward to contradict her story. The city's sprawling nature, with its labyrinth of side streets and hidden alleys, gave little hope of easily tracking down a single infant. Chief Adissa was already en route home from Dubai after receiving Lola's frantic call. On the plane, he felt an unspeakable terror gnawing at his soul. His precious Karabo missing? He replayed every moment he had spent with his daughter over the past 3 months. He recalled her tiny fingers wrapping around his thumb, her soft cooing when she recognized his voice, and the promise he made to Safia on her deathbed, that he would protect their child at all costs. The weight of betrayal, confusion, and dread pressed down on him as the plane sped through the night sky. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the Ikemba River, Karabo's fate had taken a wholly different turn than Lola expected. In a pocket of shimmering water, a presence, maternal and powerful, gazed upon the infant. The shape was hard to discern, morphing like a reflection rippling on the surface. Its voice carried the melodic cadence of ancient Ubalo lullabies, weaving an aquatic symphony that both soothed and empowered. Karabo's eyes opened wide, meeting the visage of the river goddess Hstorytine. There was no fear in the child's expression, only an unspoken bond. As if guided by an invisible current, a handful of small fish with scales reflecting moonlight formed a protective circle around Karabo. Each fish seemed to glow from within, reminiscent of bioluminescent marvels. The baby was neither drowning nor suffering. Instead, she floated comfortably, enveloped in a shimmering bubble of water that pulsed with each beat of her tiny heart. Outside that glowing orb, the murky waters flowed normally, carrying debris and silt as usual. Yet within that protective sphere, it was as though time had stopped. Osumari's ethereal form bent close, whispering an incantation in a language older than written history. Hours later, at dawn's first light, the bubble drifted toward the riverbank several kilometers downstream. High reeds and grasses lined this more remote section of the river, an area where fishermen rarely ventured due to the tricky currents. Once near the edge, the protective orb gently parted, depositing Karabo on a bed of soft grass. The fish circled thrice around her and disappeared into the deeper waters. A faint glow lingered on Karabo's skin, hinting at the divine energies that had preserved her life. It was at this moment that destiny orchestrated another unexpected twist. Mamadou, a local fisherman from Ubalo who had come to Mboya for better opportunities, decided to stop by the riverbank to gather some medicinal herbs his grandmother once taught him to use. He parted the tall reeds and nearly dropped his woven bag in shock when he spotted the baby. Alarmed, he rushed forward, expecting the worst. But to his amazement, Karabo was healthy, breathing softly, with not a bruise or scratch on her. Her bright eyes blinked up at him. Mamadou, a gentle soul, picked up the infant, carefully checking for any injuries. He looked around, but there was no sign of a parent or caretaker. Concerned, he dialed the emergency line on his phone to report a found baby. However, the line was busy, typical of the city's overburdened call center. Unsure of what else to do, Mamadou decided to take the child home. His home was a small apartment in one of the older districts, a community of migrant workers from across the country. The building was a simple three-story structure where neighbors often helped one another. Elders chatted in communal corridors, and children played local games in the yard. Upon arriving, Mamadou's neighbors, curious and kind, crowded around to see the mysterious baby. They marveled at her strikingly calm demeanor and her big, probing eyes that seemed to carry centuries of wisdom. Some of the elderly women, deeply connected to traditional beliefs, whispered that the child was an omen or perhaps blessed by the spirits. News of Karabo's disappearance had spread rapidly, flashing across social media and local news channels. Chief Adissa's child kidnapped, read the headlines, accompanied by pictures of a tearful Lola, describing a brazen midday abduction. Some networks sensationalized the story, criticizing the police for failing to maintain public safety. Others turned it into a political tool, with opposing factions blaming the city council for inadequate funding of security infrastructure. While the city buzzed with conspiracy theories and blame games, Mamadou quietly spent the day feeding and caring for Karabo. He had never been a father, but the infant seemed to respond to his gentle nature. He sought out a local nurse, an elderly woman known as Auntie Beezy, who volunteered at a nearby health clinic. Beezy examined Karabo, declaring her in perfect condition, albeit a bit dehydrated. She recommended formula and ensured Mamadou had enough supplies to care for the child temporarily. That evening, as Mamadou rocked Karabo to sleep, the room filled with a soothing lullaby that left him puzzled. He could swear he heard water trickling or waves lapping, even though his apartment was miles away from the river. A sweet-scented breeze brushed across his cheeks. He glanced around, but the windows were shut and the electric fan was off. Shrugging it off as fatigue, he returned his focus to Karabo, who was already drifting into a peaceful slumber. Little did Mamadou realize that by taking Karabo in, he had intertwined his fate with the supernatural forces guarding her. The city was about to become the stage for a confrontation between mortal greed and ancient divinity. Meanwhile, Lola continued to bask in her false story of heartbreak, never suspecting that Karabo was very much alive, cared for by a gentle stranger. Chief Adissa, returning from his trip, would soon discover anomalies in Lola's account, setting in motion an investigation that would turn Mboya upside down. In the days to come, alliances would form, secrets would unravel, and a series of unpredictable events would test the very fabric of belief in a modern African society. The child that everyone sought was hidden in plain sight, protected by forces beyond comprehension and by the unassuming fisherman who had opened his humble door to a destiny he was yet to understand. The next few days saw Chief Adissa Mafu return to Mboya in a state of frantic despair. He arrived at his mansion to find uniformed police officers dusting surfaces for prints, combing through camera footage and interviewing staff. A wave of paparazzi formed a blockade outside the large wrought iron gates, hungry for any news. Wearing a crisp white agbada, a modern twist on traditional attire, Adissa marched past the swirling camera flashes with pain etched on his face. Reporters shouted questions, but he barely acknowledged them, focused solely on finding Karabo. Inside, he met a theatrically distraught Lola, who flung herself at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. She recounted the story of how Karabo had disappeared in minutes while Lola stepped inside to grab her phone charger. According to her, the security guard had been distracted by a phone call, leaving the entrance momentarily unchecked. Someone must have taken the child in that narrow window, or so she claimed. Adissa listened intently, heartbroken, but also quietly perplexed by inconsistencies. The guard's statement suggested no such phone call existed. The gate's lock system showed no sign of forced entry. Yet, in his fragile emotional state, he wasn't ready to accuse Lola outright. While the formal investigation pressed on, a grassroots search party sprang to life in Mboya. Adissa's philanthropic work had earned him many loyal supporters, and countless volunteers took to social media, distributing digital flyers with Karabo's photograph across various platforms: WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. City dwellers pinned missing person posters on notice boards in offices, universities, and even on public transport. The cry for help reached every corner of Mboya, and perhaps that was why Mamadou soon learned the true identity of the baby he had rescued. It happened by chance. One morning, while standing in line at a neighborhood corner store, Mamadou noticed a flyer taped to the checkout counter. It showed Karabo's picture, accompanied by the words, "Missing, baby Karabo, 3 months old. Last seen at Chief Mafu's residence. Reward for any information regarding her safe return." As he read, he felt a surge of shock ripple through him. The baby in the photograph was indeed the very child sleeping in his apartment. A flurry of thoughts raced through his mind. Here was the child of one of the most influential men in the city. And the mother, presumably Lola, had appeared in tearful appeals on national television, begging for her daughter's return. Mamadou wondered if there had been a mistake. How had Karabo ended up in the river? Could she have been abandoned? Or was she truly kidnapped? His gut twisted in confusion and dread. On the one hand, returning Karabo might bring him praise or even a monetary reward. On the other, he wondered if the story told by the media was incomplete or dishonest. Nonetheless, Mamadou's sense of justice and empathy prevailed. The child deserved to be with her true family, and the father, at least, seemed genuinely worried. Resolute, he decided to contact the authorities. But before doing so, he wanted to ensure Karabo was returned safely without getting lost in the system or exploited by unscrupulous individuals. Mboya was known for its labyrinthine bureaucracy and corruption. He reached out to Auntie Bizi, the nurse who had examined Karabo, to share what he'd discovered. Bizi nodded gravely, agreeing that returning the baby was the right course of action, but also cautioning Mamadou to be wary. She had seen enough drama in hospitals where familial disputes turned violent over inheritance or status. If you do this, she advised, do it in the presence of a trustworthy figure, perhaps a renowned elder or a reputable detective. Ensure the handover is documented and that the child's well-being is prioritized. Meanwhile, the supernatural connection between Karabo and Osumirai grew stronger. Sometimes, Mamadou would catch glimpses of water droplets forming out of thin air around the child, or he'd hear a strange, melodic echo when Karabo cried. One evening, as he sang a lullaby from his home village to soothe her, he felt a surge of electric energy in the room. The overhead light flickered. A gentle gust, smelling faintly of fresh water lilies, brushed through. Instinctively, Mamadou felt Karabo was no ordinary child. Yet, he dismissed these occurrences as illusions born of fatigue. On the other side of the city, tension simmered between Adissa and Lola. As the police inquiries continued, some pointed inconsistencies emerged. The guard on duty swore he never left his post. Forensic analysis of footprints near the gate suggested someone had walked out carrying a light bundle, though it was inconclusive. Most suspiciously, the official records on the lock system showed the gate was manually opened from the inside at roughly the time Karabo vanished, contrary to Lola's claims of a forced entry. When Adissa privately confronted her, Lola grew defensive, unleashing a tirade of accusations. The police were incompetent, she was being targeted because of her new position in the family, and so forth. Despite the swirling doubts, Adissa was overwhelmed with sorrow, grief overshadowing suspicion. He told himself that he would never forgive himself if Lola were telling the truth and he wrongly accused her. Desperate, he offered a massive reward for information leading to Karabo's recovery, posting it on news broadcasts and social media. The entire city was abuzz with speculation, some even claiming they saw the baby in far-flung neighborhoods, only for the tips to be proven false. Detective Imani Abiola, a sharp, no-nonsense officer from Mboya's Special Crimes Division, was assigned to the case. Known for her relentless pursuit of the truth, Detective Imani was a modern embodiment of African excellence in law enforcement, methodical, detail-oriented, and fearless. She scrutinized every angle of the abduction, following the clues that contradicted Lola's narrative. Discreetly, she also launched an investigation into Lola's background, discovering Lola had changed her surname twice in the past few years, though the reasons were unclear. Late one night, as Adissa sat in his study, rummaging through old photographs of Safia and Karabo, his phone buzzed. It was a short text from an unknown number. "I know where your baby is. Meet me at Mboya Central Police Station at 10 a.m. tomorrow." Adissa's heart leaped. Was this another hoax? His gut told him to forward the message to Detective Imani, who immediately organized a plan to intercept any potential leads. While the city tossed and turned in collective anxiety over the missing child, Mamadou tossed and turned in his modest apartment, wrestling with his conscience. He had scrounged enough courage to type out a text message to Adissa's publicly known phone number, courtesy of the missing child posters. Unsure if it would actually reach him, Mamadou wrote it anyway, offering hope. He decided to deliver Karabo to the police station, not wanting to risk a direct confrontation at Adissa's mansion, especially if Lola was indeed involved in something nefarious. As the dawn broke over Mboya, painting the city in the pale pinks of early morning, a quiet sense of anticipation hung in the air. Forces both mortal and divine were converging upon this moment. In the depths of Ikemba River, Osumirai stirred, aware that her daughter was about to be thrust once again into the mortal domain. The old goddess's presence rippled through the water, hinting at an unfolding destiny that no one, not even Lola with her cunning plans, could fully predict. The hour of reckoning was fast approaching, and soon everyone would realize that Karabo's presence, or absence, was far more significant than anyone had initially imagined. At exactly 10 a.m., Chief Adissa strode into the polished marble lobby of Mboya Central Police Station. He was accompanied by Detective Imani Abiola, whose sleek braided hairstyle and sharp gray suit underscored her professional demeanor. The station bustled with activity, officers shuffling files, witnesses waiting on wooden benches, and suspects being led to holding cells. A faint hum of overheard fluorescent lighting mixed with the hushed conversations of anxious civilians. Amid the bustle, a timid figure stood holding a baby, draped in a simple cotton blanket. Mamadou had arrived a few minutes early, trying to steady his frayed nerves. When Adissa noticed him, their eyes locked. Adissa's face contorted with a mix of hope, fear, and overwhelming relief. He immediately recognized his daughter, though she seemed oddly serene in a stranger's arms. Detective Imani quickly intervened, leading Mamadou and Karabo to a private room for questioning. With a gentle but firm approach, she asked how Mamadou came to be in possession of the child. Mamadou recounted his discovery at the riverbank, his unsuccessful attempts to call emergency services, and his decision to care for Karabo until he could figure out how to return her safely. Adissa listened, struggling to contain his emotions. Everything about Mamadou's story seemed genuine, especially given the humble fisherman's disheveled appearance and the sincerity in his eyes. Once the official statements were recorded, Adissa gingerly took Karabo into his arms, tears pooling in his eyes as he murmured thanks to the gods. Karabo, for her part, gazed back at her father calmly, as if recognizing him from some deep, unspoken memory. It was a poignant moment, an unexpected father-daughter reunion that left even the seasoned officers in the room visibly touched. Yet beneath the jubilant reunion lay a simmering tension. The question remained, how did Karabo end up in the river? Mamadou's account mentioned no kidnapping vehicle or suspicious individuals. Detectives had found no ransom note or demands. As far as the evidence suggested, someone close to Karabo had deliberately placed her in the waters. Adissa, still cradling his daughter, felt a sickening dread twist in his stomach. Could Lola be responsible? Detective Imani, ever the professional, decided to keep her suspicions methodical. She thanked Mamadou for his heroism and assured him that both he and Karabo would be taken care of. She also arranged to have a medical examination for Karabo, ensuring there were no hidden injuries. Adissa insisted on rewarding Mamadou, offering him a generous sum of money and a promise of future support if needed. Mamadou, though grateful, seemed more relieved than anything else. He had done his duty, and a burden was lifted off his conscience. Outside the station, reporters clamored for a statement. Flashing cameras and raised microphones converged on Adissa, who shielded Karabo's face from the frenzy. With a quivering voice, he expressed his gratitude for everyone's prayers and assistance, particularly acknowledging Mamadou's bravery. He declined to speculate publicly on the circumstances of Karabo's disappearance, urging respect and caution until the investigation concluded. Detective Imani whisked them away quickly, hoping to avoid further media chaos. Within hours, social media exploded with the news that Karabo had been found safe. Hashtags like #MiracleBaby and #KaraboReturns trended, with numerous netizens praising Mamadou as a modern-day hero. Lola, on the other hand, was unprepared for this development. She was at the mansion, attempting to maintain her facade of grief, when a housekeeper rushed in to announce that Karabo was alive and in Adissa's custody. The color drained from Lola's face. She mumbled a swift excuse and locked herself in her bedroom, panic beating in her chest. It dawned on her that her carefully orchestrated plan had failed. Worse, the child was brought back under circumstances that made the involvement of foul play obvious. She realized that her story of kidnapping was on the verge of collapse. She paced the plush carpeted floor, glancing at her phone every few seconds, expecting a call from Adissa or the police. Should she flee? Confess? One thing was certain, the life of luxury she had schemed for was now in jeopardy. Back at the police station, Adissa sat in a quiet corner with Karabo while Detective Imani conferred with her team. She planned to invite Lola for questioning, to see if her statements would align with the new evidence. An on-site medical officer had already confirmed Karabo's healthy condition, noting only mild dehydration and no signs of physical harm. It was a miracle that an infant could survive being in a river without drowning or succumbing to infection. The officer joked that perhaps the river goddess was watching over her, a statement that made Adissa pause, recalling old tales Safia once shared about her ancestral ties to water spirits. A phone call from Lola came through Adissa's device. He hesitated before answering. Her voice cracked with tremors of disbelief. She claimed to be overjoyed. She insisted she rush to the station immediately to see Karabo. Detective Imani, overhearing the conversation, raised an eyebrow. The tone in Lola's voice reeked of forced surprise and anxiousness. An hour later, Lola arrived at the station, dressed in understated clothes, her eyes rimmed with redness. Upon seeing Karabo in Adissa's arms, she released a loud sob and approached cautiously. Karabo's reaction was telling. Instead of reaching out to her stepmother, the baby turned her head away, letting out a whimper. Adissa tightened his hold. Detective Imani observed every gesture. Mrs. Lola Mafu, Detective Imani began, "We'll need you to provide an updated statement now that Karabo has been found. Please follow me." She led Lola into a separate room, where a second detective waited, voice recorder on. Over the course of an hour, Lola reiterated her kidnapping story, adding new details that conflicted with her previous account. She seemed jittery, flustered, and contradicted herself under pointed questioning. Outside, Adamma sensed the situation spiraling. The memory of Sophia's final moments in the hospital bed flashed in his mind, along with the promise he made to keep Karabo safe. A swirl of anger and regret roiled within him, directed partly at himself for ignoring subtle signs that Lola might not be the caring partner she pretended to be. He swore quietly that he would uncover the truth and ensure Karabo was never threatened again. By late afternoon, Detective Imani had gathered enough discrepancies to justify a deeper probe into Lola's background. She quietly moved to request a search warrant for Lola's possessions, phone records, and email exchanges. The process would take time, but Imani's gut told her that everything pointed to Lola's culpability, or at least complicity, in Karabo's disappearance. While the mortal realm braced for the aftermath of these revelations, the realm of Hstorytine was stirring with a quiet sense of triumph. The goddess had preserved her descendant once more, weaving an invisible tapestry of protection around Karabo. In the days to come, the child's connection to the supernatural would only grow stronger. But so would Lola's desperation, culminating in acts that would place every soul connected to this tragedy at risk. A measure of temporary peace settled over Adamma and Karabo as they headed home from the station, escorted by police. Yet the tension was palpable. Lola sat in the back seat, an unreadable expression on her face. Adamma kept silent, uncertain whether to confront her outright or wait for the investigation's conclusion. All the while, Karabo dozed peacefully, as though cradled not just by her father's arms but by an unseen current of divine guardianship. The stage was set for a final showdown between motherly love, both mortal and immortal, and the dark ambitions that threatened to tear a family, and possibly the entire city, apart. Days melted into weeks, and the city of Mboya buzzed with rumors, debates, and conspiracy theories about Karabo's miraculous return. Talk show hosts speculated on national television, while tabloids circulated hyperbolic tales of supernatural intervention. Hashtags continued to trend, with netizens forming digital communities to support Chief Adamma and his child. Yet behind the spectacle, a darker undercurrent grew within Lola. She had not been formally arrested yet, but the mounting evidence pointed toward her guilt. Detective Imani's team uncovered suspicious transactions in Lola's bank statements, unexplained cash withdrawals around the time of Karabo's disappearance. Camera footage from a gas station near Akember River showed a car matching Lola's license plate passing by at the precise hour she claimed to have been at home. Perhaps most incriminating were snippets of text messages between Lola and a mysterious contact, cryptically mentioning the child and the river. None of it proved outright murder attempts, but the noose around Lola's neck was tightening. Adamma, urged by Detective Imani, pretended ignorance, continuing to live under the same roof as Lola to avoid tipping her off prematurely. He moved Karabo's crib into his private suite, keeping a close watch on his daughter at all times. The once grand mansion felt like a battlefield of silent suspicion. Lola confined herself to her bedroom, leaving only to make phone calls in hushed tones or to pace the hallway like a restless predator. Then came an unthinkable tragedy. Late one night, when the city's power grid suffered one of its frequent blackouts, Lola ventured into the hallway with a single flashlight, heading toward Adamma's suite. She decided to attempt another desperate move, though she hadn't fully formed a plan. Unbeknownst to her, Adamma's mother, an elderly woman named Mama Tio, had arrived earlier that day, worried sick about her granddaughter. Mama Tio, possessing a keen intuition shaped by decades of spiritual practice, sensed trouble. She left her guest room and stood watch near Adamma's door. In the dim corridor, Lola nearly collided with Mama Tio. The old woman's eyes gleamed with distrust, and she demanded to know why Lola was prowling around in darkness, flashlight in hand. Startled, Lola conjured a flimsy excuse about checking on Karabo. Mama Tio was unconvinced and threatened to alert the household. Panic surged through Lola. In a moment of frenzied fear, she shoved Mama Tio aside, causing the elderly woman to lose her balance. She fell backward, hitting her head on the marble floor with a sickening thud. Seeing the motionless figure on the ground, Lola dropped the flashlight and ran, her mind reeling from the realization of what she'd done. Shrouded by darkness, she fled the mansion through a side door, ignoring the calls of household staff who had heard the commotion. By the time Adissa discovered his mother, it was too late. Mama Tio was unconscious, blood pooling around her head. She was rushed to a hospital, but within the hour, she passed away from her injuries. The tragedy shook the city. Social media erupted with an outpouring of grief for the beloved matriarch, who was known for her charitable works among orphanages and women's centers. Adissa, distraught, offered a colossal reward for any information leading to Lola's capture. The police had no option but to label her a fugitive, issuing a nationwide warrant. Over the next few days, the public conversation about Karabo's disappearance shifted dramatically to the manhunt for Lola. Alone, on the run, Lola spiraled into paranoia. Hiding in a cheap motel at the city's edge, she stared at the flickering television set that displayed her name and face on the news. She recognized that returning to Adissa was impossible. The only chance she had was to leave Mboya altogether, but to do so required money, false documents, and a plan. She contacted old friends from her shady past, making desperate pleas for help. Few were willing to get involved in what was now a high-profile murder investigation. Amid the turmoil, Karabo's supernatural connection manifested more strongly. In the nights following Mama Teyo's passing, Adissa noticed a spectral glow around his daughter's crib. It was subtle, like moonlight dancing on water. Sometimes he awoke to the sound of gentle splashing, despite the dryness of his bedroom. Concerned, he sought answers, rummaging through Safia's old journals. There he found references to an old legend about a lineage with ties to a water goddess named Osumurai. Safia had scribbled cryptic notes about premonitions, protective charms, and ceremonies performed by her grandmother along the banks of Ikemba. Piecing these clues together, Adissa realized Karabo might be more than just an ordinary infant. He sought out an elderly custodian of Yubilo's traditions, a woman named Elder Kamara, whose life mission was to preserve ancient songs, myths, and genealogies. Over tea in her modest home in the outskirts of Mboya, Elder Kamara listened quietly as Adissa recounted the strange occurrences surrounding Karabo. She responded by chanting a forgotten lullaby in a dialect that had nearly vanished. In that moment, Karabo, seated in Adissa's lap, cooed and clapped her tiny hands, as if recognizing the melody. Elder Kamara explained that Karabo's maternal bloodline carried the blessing of Osumurai, the river goddess who presides over transitions, rebirth, and justice. In older times, children born under this sign were revered as potential intermediaries between the spiritual and mortal realms. The goddess protected them fiercely, but such children often faced violent opposition from those who did not understand or believe them to be a threat. She warned Adissa that as Karabo grew, her presence would attract both benevolent allies and malevolent foes, for the mortal realm and the realm of spirits often clashed over such gifted souls. Armed with this understanding, Adissa became more determined than ever to protect Karabo and ensure that Lola faced justice. Detective Imani ramped up efforts to track Lola down, circulating her photograph and details across national borders. Meanwhile, in her cramped motel room, Lola grew desperate. She saw no way out but forward. She vowed to carry out one final plan, something so drastic. It would overshadow all suspicion of her involvement in Mama Teyo's death and Karabo's disappearance. News broke that Lola might try to flee via the port city of Salaba, known for lax oversight on cargo ships. The police set up checkpoints along the highways, at train stations, and airports. Yet Lola was cunning. She used fake identities and cash transactions to stay under the radar. For days, the city was on edge, expecting her capture at any moment. Adissa's mansion, once a symbol of wealth and success, was now eerily quiet, mourning the loss of Mama Teyo and living in perpetual fear of another tragedy. It was during this tense lull that Karabo exhibited the most extraordinary sign yet of her divine lineage. Late one afternoon, as Adissa tried to console his crying daughter, a swirl of water vapor formed around her, coalescing into a shape reminiscent of a feminine figure. The visage was fleeting but distinct enough to make Adissa gasp in awe. Karabo's sobs ceased, replaced by a serene calm. The watery shape dissolved into the air, But not before Adissa sensed a palpable message. Protect Karabo, for a final confrontation was imminent. Unpredictable events had already shaken Boya. An infant found miraculously unharmed in a river, a stepmother turned fugitive, and a grandmother tragically lost. Yet the ultimate reckoning was still to come. And neither the mortal forces nor the spiritual guardians could fully control how it would all unfold. A suffocating humidity settled over Mboya, heralding the approach of the rainy season. Thunderheads gathered on the horizon each afternoon, though the city still awaited the storm's first downpour. In the midst of this tense, electric atmosphere, word reached Detective Imani that Lola had been spotted near the old cargo docks along the coastal city of Salaba, several hours' drive from Boya. Acting quickly, the police coordinated a sting operation with the Port Authority, determined to intercept Lola before she could slip onto a cargo vessel bound for parts unknown. By the time the convoy of police vehicles arrived at the sprawling docks, evening had turned the sky a bruise-colored purple. Cranes loomed overhead like metallic giants, and the salty scent of the ocean mingled with the exhaust fumes of cargo trucks. Detective Imani and a squad of armed officers fanned out, checking ship manifests, interviewing dockworkers, and surveying each dusty warehouse. For a while, it seemed Lola had once again slipped through their grasp. Suddenly, a shout rang out. A young officer had spotted someone matching Lola's description entering a dilapidated storage facility at the far edge of the docks. The officers advanced cautiously, guns drawn, flashlights revealing a labyrinth of stacked crates and dusty corridors. Detective Imani signaled for silence. In the faint beam of a flickering overhead light, they glimpsed Lola, disheveled and wild-eyed, rifling through a large wooden crate. "Lola Mafu," Detective Imani called out, voice echoing. "This is the police. Step away from the crate and come out with your hands where we can see them." Lola froze, then turned to face the detectives, brandishing a small handgun. Her complexion, once glistening with poise and vanity, was now pallid and etched with desperation. The officers took cover, tensely waiting to see if she would fire. Slowly, Lola backed away, pressing herself against a wall of crates, the gun shaking in her trembling hands. "It was never supposed to be like this," she rasped, her voice brittle. "If only that child had disappeared for good, none of this, Mamadou, the investigation, would have happened." Detective Imani edged forward, hands raised, calmly reminding Lola that she was surrounded. "Think about your situation. There's no escape," the detective said, her tone gently persuasive despite the tension. "Put the gun down and let's talk." Lola's gaze darted around as if looking for another exit, but there was none. "I did what I had to do," she hissed. "It's too late for me now." A flash of resolve hardened her features. She raised the gun, but before she could pull the trigger, a thunderous crash reverberated above them. The old warehouse's roof, corroded by years of neglect, was giving way under the weight of accumulating storm water. A sudden deluge burst through the broken roof, water pouring onto the scene as heavy rain hammered the docks. Detective Imani and the officers scrambled to avoid falling debris. In that moment of chaos, Lola fled deeper into the warehouse, weaving through shadows and crates. The police pursued, water sloshing around their ankles. Meanwhile, back in Boya, Adissa clutched Karabo in the living room, peering out the window as the skies opened up with torrential rain. He felt an inexplicable sense of foreboding, as if the storm was an omen of something monumental unfolding. Karabo stirred in his arms, letting out a sound that was neither cry nor coo, more like a resonant hum. The entire house felt charged with a strange energy. Suddenly, the swirling water presence from before manifested again, only this time it was more defined. Out of the air, moisture condensed into a faintly glowing figure resembling a regal woman in flowing robes made of water. Adissa watched, breath caught in his throat. The figure extended a translucent hand toward Karabo, and though the baby was in her father's arms, a soft wave of aqua light passed over her. In that moment, Adissa understood, Osumarai, the river goddess, was blessing her child, perhaps drawing on the power of the raging storm. The luminous apparition vanished, leaving Adissa awestruck. He sensed that the goddess herself was intervening somewhere far away, likely where Lola was making her last stand. Back at the Salaba docks, Lola stumbled through flooded corridors, slipping on wet concrete. She realized too late that she'd cornered herself in a makeshift dead end. The police advanced carefully, flashlights cutting through the darkness. As she raised her weapon once more, a glimmer caught the corner of her eye. Water was seeping under the loading bay doors in a powerful surge, as if an invisible hand were pushing the ocean inland. The water level rose rapidly, quickly turning the floor into a shallow river. Panicking, Lola tried to climb a stack of crates, but the slippery surfaces offered no grip. Detective Imani, drenched, approached with unwavering resolve. "Lola, it's over," she declared. "Don't make this worse than it already is." Just then, a freak wave crashed through the loading doors, toppling crates and sweeping everyone off their feet. Officers clung to beams and corners to avoid being washed away. Lola, disoriented, lost her grip on the gun. She was carried by the torrent toward a gaping hole in the wall, the storm's surge pulling her inexorably toward the open sea. In those final moments of breathless terror, she caught one last glimpse of the swirling waters that seemed almost alive with a vengeful spirit. A flash of recognition flickered in her eyes. The rumor of Osumarai's watchful presence was real. The wave dragged her into the darkness, leaving no trace behind save for floating debris. By the time the waters receded, Lola was gone, vanished into the stormy night. A frantic search ensued, with coast guards and divers scouring the area, but they found no body. Some believed she drowned. Others whispered that the river goddess claimed her. Officially, she remained a missing fugitive, but everyone suspected she had perished in those tumultuous waters. When Detective Imani returned to Mboya, she delivered the news to Chief Adissa. Though justice had been served in its own unpredictable way, Adissa felt no triumph, only a sobering melancholy. He pressed a gentle kiss on Karabo's forehead, silently thanking the deity who had protected his child. In time, the city of Mboya moved on, and talk of Lola's disappearance faded into urban legend. Some said that on stormy nights, a mournful cry could be heard along the old docks of Salaba, echoing Lola's final moments. Months later, Adissa organized a grand ceremony to honor Mama Teyo's life and to perform a Thanksgiving ritual for Karabo. The event fused modern sophistication with deeply rooted African traditions. Dignitaries arrived in sleek SUVs, locals danced to pounding drums, and a modern gospel choir performed alongside traditional praise singers. A ceremony was held by the banks of Ikemba River, overseen by Elder Kamara. Friends, neighbors, and curious onlookers gathered as Adissa gently placed a woven basket of ceremonial offerings into the water. The basket contained fresh flowers, grains, and a small carved effigy representing Karabo's lineage. As the basket drifted along the river's surface, the water glimmered in the late afternoon sun. It felt as if the entire city paused to watch. Karabo, in her father's arms, giggled with an otherworldly sweetness. A hush fell, broken only by the gentle lapping of water. For a moment, it seemed a soft ripple in the current bowed toward the shore, as if acknowledging the child. In a final, unanticipated twist, Karabo reached out a tiny hand toward the floating basket. Everyone gasped as a sudden ray of sunlight illuminated her, creating an aura that merged with the reflection of the water. The effect lasted a mere heartbeat, but it was enough for those present to sense a divine presence. Elder Kamara softly chanted an ancient verse, calling upon Osumarai's blessing for peace and prosperity. And so the saga concluded with a profound sense of closure, both for the mortal inhabitants of Mboya and the timeless spirits that watched over them. Karabo would grow under the guiding hand of her father, free from Lola's schemes, yet never far from the protective current of the goddess. In the city's modern tapestry, woven from skyscrapers, smartphones, ancestral beliefs, and unstoppable progress, the legend of Karabo, daughter of the river goddess, became a testament to the enduring power of love, faith, and the mysteries that lie just beneath the surface of everyday life. No one could have scripted a more unpredictable ending. A missing child found safe, a villainous stepmother consumed by the very waters she sought to wield, and the subtle, indelible mark of a goddess on an infant destined for greatness. In that convergence of tragedy, hope, and the supernatural, Mboya learned that some forces cannot be tamed by mere human ambition, and that sometimes destiny flows like a river, sweeping away all that stands against it. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.